Hello, Audioholics. This is Logan, and with me is
Fred Durst.
Can we kick him from the call?
Rolling.
Can we kick him from the call, please?
If you take a look around, then you will see that we are doing a Rush ranking today in the wrong opinion.
Wait, I'm looking around. Where's the ranking? Is it like in the sky somewhere? Or
Bro, you're blind. You wouldn't see it anyway.
oh, right. We are going to do this in chronological order because somebody thought that that wasn't a good idea and turned out to be wrong. So
Just drank the last of my pickle juice. I'm very sad.
you drink pickle juice. What the fuck is wrong with you, Tyler?
Drank a whole cup of it, and now it's gone, and I'm sad.
Yeah, I drank a whole cup of pickle juice. I'm fucking 60 years old and have no taste buds because they've all been burnt off by years of smoking.
Damn. You have some anger problems within you.
Suspiciously specific.
You can't even say it. You can't even say it.
Rare insults. There, I can say that.
Yeah, that you can say. r/I have Reddit.
r/shower thoughts. You are only immortal for a limited time. Right. So let's do this in chronological order. Did you want to start or should I start?
I'll start. All right.
All right.
So the first album in Rush's discography is Hold Your Fire. No, I'm just joking. It's debut album. Now, the Rush self-titled album, I do like. I think that it's a good album for a debut album, but I don't love it. There's a lot of Zeppelin fan fiction on this album. This is also the only Rush album without Neil Peart, and that certainly shows in the quality of the songwriting, which just isn't as good. The production is really good for the time, and the vocals, in my opinion, are the best part of the album. The riffs are good, but they sometimes kind of just sound like they're ripping off Led Zeppelin, which is a shame because, as you'll see with later albums, Alex Lifeson is an amazing guitarist in of himself, and he doesn't need to be ripping off shitty guitarists like Jimmy Page.
I beg your pardon, sir. You're going to get hate for that.
All right, hot take. Jimmy Page is the most overrated guitarist in the entirety of rock
Have you
history.
never heard like this the solo from Black Dog though?
I'm not saying, I don't know. Like anyone could have written
He like
that.
played
Tony
on a
Iommi,
12 string before it was cool.
Tony Iommi's feet could write better riffs than Jimmy Page. That fucking guy was the most sloppy guitar player. He just played blues riffs for days. He's
well, yeah, I mean that
uninspired
happens when there's
slop.
only like two riffs in your particular genre.
Exactly. Fucking Jimmy Page sucks. Anyway, Here Again was one of the best songs on the album. It had really good instrumentation and amazing vocals. I love Geddy Lee, okay? I know a lot of people, specifically bitches, walk up and they're like, oh, Geddy Lee sounds like a girl. He's a terrible vocalist. Fuck you. Geddy Lee is a great vocalist. Even in the later years when he can't hit those high notes and he can't sing as well as he used to, he's still better than 90% of these fucking singers who come out nowadays, who all sound the exact fucking same. All of them sound like they're ripping off Fall Out Boy or Killswitch Engage, and it's terrible. Hashtag the state of modern rock. Anyway, yes, love Geddy Lee. Great singer. And I think he really shines on this album. But as much as I love Here Again, The Working Man is without a doubt first place for me. That jam in the middle section is so fucking good. What You're Doing is another really good deep cut in this band's discography, and there are quite a few of those that we'll talk about. But this one, I just don't understand why more people don't like this song. Overall, not one of my favorite Rush albums, but the first on my list that I would totally listen to again.
All right, so here we are. I would also put self-titled in the exact same place, a C. And I think that most of what he said I agree with. I think there's elements as to why this album does and doesn't work. And most of it is it's a debut album. You aren't usually going to find your sound on a debut album unless you're
Yeah.
somebody who's already had a decent amount of experience in the industry as it is. You know, somebody like Danzig, for example, can come swinging out of the gate with a really good album because, you know, he's already been in the Misfits and things like that. And he already kind of knows how the industry works, what sells and what doesn't. And again, there are like exceptions, like Black Sabbath, their self titled debut album, that's also really good. But I don't think anybody would really say that it's their best album. And that's partially a result of them just throwing shit at a wall and seeing what works half the time, which is what most new bands do. As he said, Neil Peart is not on this album. Instead, it is John Rutsey, who brought. There was a bit of a clash, I think, with the with the uh, types of artists that they are inspirations. I'm an idiot and I couldn't think of that word. There's a bit of a clash with those with the inspirations of Rutsey and Geddy Lee and Alex. I think that Rutsey was more into like Led Zeppelin, Bad Company, a lot of classic rock bands that we all know and love now, but were really popular at the time. And I think Geddy Lee might have had a bit more in terms of inspiration. Like even if it's just more like, you know, old school Genesis or Yes, which not everybody was listening to at that point. So what you have is an album that's very derivative of popular bands at the time. And since Neil Peart wasn't there, you had a lot of really weird kind of cock rock songs. When, like, you know, Grab Yourself a Friend, In the Mood, even What You're Doing, which I would say is probably one of my favorite songs on this album besides Working Man, kind of follows that same sort of totem pole, I think. That being, yeah, like it's a good album, but again, falls a bit short of being perfect.
All right. And so that brings us to the next album in Rush's discography, which is Fly By Night. Now, Fly By Night goes up quite a bit in my ranking. I'm going to put it in the B category. Now, the reason for that is I think this is pretty much in all regards improvement to the debut album in every way, shape, and form. The riffs are more original. The Neil Peart is the first. I'm sorry, this is the first album where Neil Peart is featured, and the grand improvement in songwriting is seen on songs like Beltor and the Snow Dog, Anthem, the title
Title
track,
track, yeah.
Beneath, Below, and Beyond, I think is like my favorite track on the album. Even songs like Riverdale, which I didn't really like at first, but now I find like the flowery, poetic scenery that it illustrates with the music quite quite beautiful, personally. This album works in all of the ways that the Rush debut didn't, and it's still got that Zeppelin fan fiction, at least a little bit. I'd say this is the last album that really has that in the forefront of the influences, because in the next album we get some prog elements, and the album after that is almost entirely a prog album. But this album's kind of the last album I would say is in that tier of Led Zeppelin fan fiction, but you still got those odd time signatures and things like that that come with Neil Peart's songwriting. And for that, I really love this album. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. And by the way, I don't remember if I said this, but I gave Rush's debut a 7 out of 10.
All right, I'm basically gonna say everything that you said about Fly By Night, but give it an A. Mainly because I think that all of those things that you talked about, and I don't even really like Riverdale. You might have inspired me to go back and listen to it. I don't think it's really going to change my score since it's already pretty good. But I think that, again, still a little bit derivative if I had to like talk, nitpick a bit. But again, that's still just a band finding their sound. There's no real harm in that, especially if it's your second album in and you don't really know entirely what you're doing. See, that's a bit of a pun off of the first album. See, one of the songs off the first album was "What You're Doing," and I said you don't entirely know
Oh, God, I think
what
I'm
you're
going
doing.
bald listening to this.
Oh, clap, clap.
Clap,
Anyway,
clap. Sounding like Clapton over there.
yeah, I don't really have much to say that he hasn't already said. Much better songwriting, much better drumming, much more inspired, I would say. Um, there are some songs I obviously like over others, but overall, I think as a whole, it all adds up to a really good album.
All right, and that brings us to Caress of Steel, which, by the way, I've always thought kind of sounded like Corrosive Steel. I don't know if that was on
Corrosive
purpose,
Steel,
but
maybe.
I don't know. But either way, I am going to put this album above Rush's debut, but in the C category. Now, there's still at least a bit of Led Zeppelin fan fiction in here in songs like Bastille Day, Lakeside Park, even I Think I'm Going Bald. And I mean, hell, you can even hear it on songs like Fountain of Lamneth. But overall, I would say this album is a much bigger step into the territory of progressive rock. A lot of people think that 2112 is the first album where they had an entire song take up the whole side of a record. It was actually this album with Fountain of Lamneth. And a lot of people really don't like Fountain of Lamneth, but to those people, I say, fuck you, because it's really fucking good. I think if you jerk off and get rid of that hate boner, make it go down, and you listen to it again with an objective mind, an open mind, you will realize that Fountain of Lamneth is actually really, really good. Is it as good as 2112? Is it as good as some of their other prog epics? No. But it's still really good. And to say that it's bad, I think, is just ridiculous. Now, for those of you who aren't in the know for Rush history, this was considered the only commercial and critical failure of the band because they put this album
Simultaneously,
out
Rush has
and
always been a critical failure, but
well, yeah, the critics always hated Rush. At least they did for their golden age. But
yeah.
this album in particular was lambasted. Nobody liked it. I mean, there's even stories of the band showing this album to um, a member of Kiss. I forget who it was, but even the dude was like, "I don't get it. This doesn't sound good." So, like people don't like this album, but I think that in the modern day, if you go back and listen to it objectively, you listen to the songs like Bastille Day, Lakeside Park, again, Fountain of Lamneth, you'll realize there's a lot to enjoy about this album. Is it spotty? Sure. I mean, I Think I'm Going Bald is a really weird song, and I'm not sure I like it that much. The Necromancer, although I would say is very underrated, does have its flaws because it's basically a half of it's like spoken word. And it's
Yeah.
really fucking silly. I mean, it's about Rush basically going into the world of Lord of the Rings. They're just writing themselves in Middle Earth. Like, that's the most nerdy shit I have ever heard. But it's silly in a fun way for me. And so I actually
Are you
really
sure?
enjoy this
You
album.
were saying they shook their Led Zeppelin fan fiction off this album. Are you sure about that?
I said it was still there a little bit, and that's you can hear it in that song. No, but I give this album a 7.5 out of 10. And I'll say again, if you don't like this album, fuck you. Okay, your turn.
So I like the album. I'm actually going to place it exactly where Tyler put it. I might be a little bit more negative about it. I think that The problem with this album is that it's an album that bit off a bit more than it could chew. You have a song like Necromancer, which most of it is just this weird spoken word thing. Only somewhere towards the middle does it get anywhere listenable. And Fountain of Lamneth, I wouldn't even say it's bad. It's just bad as compared to 2112. And I think even Tyler would agree to that. It's not that good, but it's not that bad either. It's something that you can definitely listen to. And if 2112 and the following albums had not come out, we would all be heralding this album as a bona fide classic if this was the last Rush album.
Yeah, probably. It would be a cult classic for sure.
Yeah.
I
And
still think it
also,
is. I think it's become somewhat of a cult classic
it
over the
has. It
years, even
has
amongst
become.
Rush fans.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and part of that is because of some of the really good singles, like he said, Bastille Day, Lakeside Park, even the I Think I'm Going Bald, which, yeah, is still kind of goofy, but I kind of like it in its sort of tongue-in-cheek goofiness.
And
So,
for the record, the guy who wrote that song wasn't a member of Rush. It was actually a friend of theirs, and he is now bald.
oof. It's gonna be funny in 10 years when you go bald. I mean, you already have the weird fucking Iron Man
Yeah, I
hairline,
have
so
really bad receding hairline, but
yeah.
you know what? I rock it.
Mm.
All right, so
Anyway,
this next album I really love talking about. Not just because it's great, but because the history behind it is hilarious. So the next album is, of course, 2112. And this is the album that really cemented Rush as a band that was going to stay as a household name. This album was going to be the last album that Rush ever made because after the flop that was Caress of Steel, the label was fixing to drop Rush and just be like, no, done with you. So their manager went to talk to the record label, and the manager basically just lied to the record label. The manager was like, yeah, no, they totally agree with you. They're going to write more commercial songs. They're going to be shorter. It's going to be more poppy. You have nothing to worry about. The manager just lied to them. Rush, their mindset was, you know what? If we're going to write our last album, we are going to go out with a bang. So when the label renewed them for one last album, they wrote 2112, which is by far their biggest foray into prog. You have the title track 2112, which is 20 minutes long, only a minute longer than Fountain of Lamneth, I'll note. But they didn't just like go back to commercial shit. They double, triple, quadruple down on this sidelong epic thing. And I'd say they pretty much perfected it on this album. 2112 isn't just one of the best Rush songs. I would go as far as to say it's one of the best songs in rock history. It is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the story behind it is so good that they have written novels and comics and things of that nature
I mean,
about
hell,
it.
it's based off an Ayn Rand novel.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of Ayn Rand fan fiction in Rush's discography, but this song in particular, a lot of people call a ripoff. Either way, it's a fantastic song that is worth a listen. And the second half is just as good. You have Passage to Bangkok, which is a classic. You have Twilight Zone, which is one of my favorite Rush songs. You have Lessons, you have Tears, and the amazing Something for Nothing, which is all extremely proggy. It's, I would say, basically more Caress of Steel before the Necromancer, but improved in basically every way. This is actually the last album where you can hear any Led Zeppelin influence. After this, they go completely balls deep into progressive rock, and then they go into their synth shit and so on and so forth. But this album is basically the best of both worlds. You have the best of Fly By Night with the best of the albums we're going to talk about next. I love this album for what it is, and I give it a 9 out of 10. The only reason it's not a perfect score, and I take a point off, is because it's a little disjointed. You listen to 2112 in the first half, and it almost feels like this album was supposed to be two separate albums, but they just, slapped those songs on the second half because they needed singles, and to me, that makes the album feel very disjointed, going from that long song to a bunch of 3-minute songs. And due to that disjointed feeling, I have to take off a point just objectively. And honestly, even as a listener of this album, sometimes I just skip 2112 and do the second half. And sometimes I only listen to 2112. I mean, if it were a good album, I would listen to the whole thing. So there you go. 9 out of 10.
All right, so I am going to give 2112 an A rating as well, but I am going to put it below Fly By Night. So, first of all, is it less commercial? Yes. But is it more palatable than Caress of Steel? Yes. So, it's almost not entirely a lie to say that this is more commercial, in that it's more palatable to a wider audience than Caress of Steel. 2112, I mean, like, it's a 20-minute long epic. To all the people who say, Freebird is too long, it's a whole 8 minutes. Stairway to Heaven is 7 minutes long, it's too long. Listen to 2112, or better yet, listen to Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull, and then come back to me, you bunch of whiners. So 2112 is obviously a masterpiece. I mean, everything that Tyler said is totally accurate. The musical diversity is there. The riffs are there. The drumming, it's Neil Peart. Do I even need to tell you it's there? Really, everything about it is good. The singles, on the other side, keep this album from getting any higher. I would give it like a 9 out of 10. But, like, okay, Passage to Bangkok is good. Twilight Zone is all right. I mean, it's definitely really trippy and experimental, but if it wasn't there and just, like, turned up, like, 30 years later on the deluxe edition, nobody would bat an eye. Lessons is probably the best song on the second half. Tears isn't very good at all. It's like this weird kind of acoustic thing that doesn't really build up to anything. And Something for Nothing, while being kind of preachy in its message, does have some really killer riffs and one of the best vocal performances by Geddy Lee, which, hot take, Geddy Lee is not an amazing vocalist.
Triggered.
I think that, like, his voice gave out really early on, even in his prime. And, like, I don't think that he was really that good anyway. He could just sing really high. Big deal. Robert Plant could do that as well, and he did it better.
Oh, fuck you. Robert Plant sucks.
You suck. Like, listen to, like, the first 2 Led Zeppelin albums and tell me that that is better than
He
Geddy
sounds
Lee.
like a dying cat. Ran around. Oh, fuck Robert Plant.
Okay, see,
He's
here's
just a screeching
difference.
Yeti.
Here's the difference between Robert Plant and Geddy Lee.
Geddy Lee can sing and Robert Plant screeches. That's the
No,
difference.
Robert Plant is bluesy and Geddy Lee has next to no actual personality with his voice.
Oh,
Similar
what?
thing with, like, Dream Theater as well, and Dream Theater copied that formula full cloth. So,
I mean, yeah, the vocals in Dream Theater are very similar to the vocals in Rush because Rush was their greatest influence. But, like, to say Rush isn't unique in their vocals is insane. You could pick Geddy Lee out of 15,000 vocalists just based on his style alone.
I mean, yeah, you can, but, like, the only thing I would say is that, like, he kind of, like, it's operatic in some places, but especially, like, some of the albums he would do later on, like Signals and later, are sometimes unlistenable because of his terrible vocals. Now, yeah, of course, hindsight is 2020, and we know that now that his voice would eventually peter out and never fully recover. But I'm saying he was never that good. I'm not saying he's bad necessarily. I'm just saying that he is extremely overrated, and that is the only thing in Rush that I would have scrapped. I would not have scrapped Geddy Lee because obviously he's an amazing bassist.
And keyboard player. He's a great
And,
keyboard
oh,
player
and
too.
keyboard player as well. Yeah.
You ever think about how insane Geddy Lee is to be playing bass, keyboard, and vocals live?
Oh, yeah, that is insane that a three-piece can do all of that. But I think that if there was one even slightly weak link in throughout Rush's discography, it's Geddy Lee's vocals.
You know, I think you're as strong as your weakest link, and Geddy Lee's vocals, if we're talking strong, is like, a giant pickup truck. I think
Yeah.
Geddy Lee is a very, very good singer. He always has been. And I would even go as far as to say that I prefer his vocals on later albums than when he was doing the sort of Led Zeppelin
Really? When
ripoff
he's doing
shit.
like the ha 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 thing. Like it's like
Like,
he's not in key most of the time on like Clockwork Angels,
oh,
Snakes and
he's in key.
Arrows.
He's
He's
in
not
key,
in
but
key.
no, he is. He's definitely in key, but
He's like varies key. I don't know. He's like in between key.
in between key. No, but like that's not bad vocals. That's him like moving between notes. That's a display of vocal strength.
No, that's awful. It sounds awful. It sounds like somebody doing drunk karaoke half the time.
I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, but I highly disagree with you. I think Geddy Lee is one of the stronger points about Rush. I will actually go as far as to say that he's better. His vocals are better than his bass playing. And I consider him to be the best bass player of all time, at
Triggered.
least to me.
I'm triggered.
I really, really love Geddy Lee's vocals. I'm sorry.
It's not that good. It never really was. I mean, like, okay, fine. In like the first few albums, yeah, it was pretty good, but it was still the weakest link in Rush. The bass was better, the keyboard was better, the drums were way better. The guitar was Alex is one of the most underrated guitarists possibly of all time.
Oh, I agree with that.
Geddy Lee by far is I would even say the most underrated bassist of all times by virtue of being a bassist.
He's
But
like I said, he's my favorite bassist. I can't think of one other bass player that I would say is maybe Geezer Butler, but even so, I would say Geddy Lee is better than Geezer Butler.
yeah,
I'm only saying Geezer Butler because of how influential he was as a bass player.
yeah.
A lot of people
But
don't talk about this, but like before Geezer Butler, as a bass player, you were expected to do all of these complex things behind the guitar. But when Geezer Butler came out with Black Sabbath, what he did is he played almost exactly what the guitar did, or he played very similar because what he wanted to do was support the guitar. And
yeah,
that was
I
a pretty
agree.
influential way of bass playing. And for that, I consider him one of the best bass players of all time. But Geddy Lee, man, he's just so good.
Yeah,
So many amazing grooves from like there are entire songs in Rush's discography that are just made by Geddy Lee's bass playing.
I agree. And if you want to learn more about Geezer Butler and Black Sabbath as a whole, we highly recommend our earlier video where we did a wrong opinion on Black Sabbath.
Let's be honest, that video sucked.
You suck.
It was not a good video, honestly.
All right.
But yeah, like even if we were to agree that Geddy Lee's vocals is the weakest part of Rush, you got to at least admit it serves the music. I wouldn't
Fair
want
enough.
anyone else to be the front man of Rush.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think that I guess I don't know because I don't live in the alternate universe where there is a different vocalist for Rush, but I don't love his vocals, especially for like the later things, which in my opinion, like after, you know, I think like, Signals, even like some of Synth Rush is really good, and then it was all kind of peaks and valleys from there. So, I think that like the later Rush should not be overlooked. Definitely some albums should be overlooked, but not even that. But I think that I wouldn't say that Geddy Lee's a bad vocalist. I think that he is just the weakest link in Rush. And if you are willing to agree on that, then I think we have an agreement.
No, I'm not willing to agree on that, but I
Okay.
don't think there's really any convincing me on that topic.
All right.
So let's
So
move on
next album.
to the next album, and the next album is one of my personal favorites in Rush's discography, A Farewell to Kings. Oh God, this album is classic. I love everything about this album, from the fantastic, complex guitar riffs and leads to the amazing bass grooves to the fantastic vocals and stand out drumming from Neil Peart. This is not my favorite performance from Neil Peart. Even I said
Called him
Peart
Neil
by
Peart, you fat kid.
accident. It's not my favorite performance from Neil Peart, but it is still one of his best. From the opener to Xanadu to Cygnus. This is a perfect record, and every song is killer. This is just a straight 10 out of 10 for me. I understand why some people might call this album a little more obtuse because, Hemispheres we'll talk about next is more insane, is more complex, but I would also say it's more commercial than this album. This album is much more obtuse, but that's part of why I love it.
So, is it possible to really like an album and still call it overrated?
Yes.
Okay, so Farewell to Kings is A tier, above everything. Um, it's a really good album. Xanadu is obviously the standout track, but Closer to the Heart,
I will dine on honeydew.
yeah.
It's
But
fucking silly at times, I'll
yeah,
admit.
it's kind of silly at times. But Closer to the Heart, I think is really overrated. Do I
Oh,
understand? Do I understand why it got big? Yeah, it's a silly little ballad, whatever.
that's a good song.
It's not that good. It's so weirdly out of place. It's not. I mean, I guess for a love ballad, I can say like it's one of the best written love ballads I've ever heard. But it's still kind of overrated, and I don't think it's not one of Rush's better hits. It's no Free Will or Spirit of Radio or even Working Man.
Oh, it's on par with all of those
No,
songs.
it is not.
Yes, it is.
Um,
It's even
no, it's
better than some of those songs. Definitely better than Free Will.
now. What I will say is that one of the things that this album did and the next few albums by Rush did was really beef up the mix and really do a good job with that. The mix, I think I like this era of Rush. I like that mix better than any era of Rush, where the guitars were really kind of clean sounding. Everything was super clean sounding. The bass was high up there in the mix. The drums really popped out. Geddy Lee's voice popped out. The bass just like everything like was perfect, and it remained that way for quite a few years later. But that being said, like I said, Closer to the Heart is overrated. Cinderella Man, I don't really like it, but I find myself humming it every so often. Um, what was the one song off of this album?
Madrigal is really good. That one
Magical.
always
That
stands
was I
out.
didn't like. I didn't like that one at all.
Really?
Oh wait, no, Magical. Oh yeah, no. Voyager, I think, was also kind of weird.
That was the Cygnus song. the
Oh,
last
that's
one, the
right.
really
That's
long
right.
one.
Oh yeah, Magical was the song that like I didn't really like and I thought was kind of weird. But like I would not say there's necessarily any bad songs off of this album, but there are songs that I like over others. And Xanadu is the best song off of this album
Logan
by
just
far.
really loves Honeydew. What can
I
I say?
really I do like Honeydew, you're right, but I also like Xanadu.
You know,
Like,
before I listened to this album, I straight up did not believe you that there was a Rush song called Xanadu. Because, like, I originally heard the word Xanadu, like, in some stupid fucking, like, B movie.
yeah.
I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, like the Rush song. I'm like, what fucking Rush? There's no Rush song called Xanadu. Fuck you. Didn't even believe him.
And and would you have believed me that it's one of the best songs in their entire discography?
No, like even if you convinced me that it was real, I would believe it was terrible. It's amazing what B movie horribleness can do to you.
All right. But honestly, that's really all I have to say. Just amazing mix, amazing album, really unique instruments. It's an amazing album. Just some songs I like over others, but it's still worthy of being A tier.
All right, and that leads us to Hemispheres. Now, this is a good time to say that, oh man, like these albums are interchangeable for me. Sometimes I
Yeah.
prefer Hemispheres, sometimes I prefer Farewell to Kings, but today I prefer Hemispheres. Now, the reason for that is that, oh, it's just so good, man. Like it's so batshit complex insanity. I mean, the last track on the album, La Via Strangiato, is literally subtitled in exercise and self-indulgence. They knew they were making the wankiest fucking album in their discography. They knew. But you have songs like The Trees, which, like it or hate it, I think it's great. You have Circumstances, which is one of my favorite Rush songs. Probably the Rush song I actually come back to the most. I can't seem to get enough of it. And you've also got the title track, which is just epic, though the story is really fucking silly. You know, like this album, its biggest flaw is just that it's not long enough. It's only 36 minutes. Should have been an hour. I would listen to an hour of this.
Yeah.
And that's the best praise you can give an album is just that it's not long enough. You want more of it. This album is absolutely killer. And the only reason I put it above Farewell to Kings is because of Circumstances. Just the fact that I return to that far more than anything on Farewell to Kings.
All right. So, Hemispheres is going to be my first S-rated album on this list, and it definitely won't be the last. But you know, I'm going to say this for the majority of this list, it was right there at number one, and I thought it was unchangeable. And honestly, the only reason it is not at number one is just down to personal preference. Me personally, I would be more likely to listen to the next album, which we will get into, Permanent Waves. I would be more likely to listen to Free Will than, say, title track of Hemispheres. Actually, the one thing that Hemispheres did most effectively, I shit you not, title track legitimately made me think my record player was broken. I have an RPM app, and I was listening to most of these albums on vinyl. I have most of the early Rush catalog on vinyl, except for some reason I don't have self-titled and moving pictures, mainly just because I never saw them for sale. But like it legitimately made me think my record player was broken to the point where I had to put the RPM app on my phone, rest it on my record player, and sure enough, that's just how the album that song is super warped. So I cannot be the only one who must have been trolled by that.
Hmm.
Anyway, though, I mean, Circumstances obviously a classic. Trees, maybe not my favorite hit song from Rush, but you can't deny that the Neil Peart banging on the wood blocks, you can't deny that that has changed your life. So, and not to mention, it's not a terrible song either. It's just maybe not my personal favorite. But yeah, I'd say I wrote in my notes that this is almost perfect. I stand by that.
All right. So that brings us to the next album in Rush's discography, Permanent Waves. Now, at this point in their discography, I think they were aware that they had gone really fucking far with Hemispheres. I mean, like I said, they were aware that this was an exercise in self-indulgence. So they kind of took it back on here, and I would say this is my favorite period of Rush. Now, the next album after this is going to be lower, but this is still probably my favorite era, this Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures era. I wish they'd stayed in it longer because I feel like we deserved more of it. And I do think we kind of get that later in Clockwork Angels and Snakes and Arrows, but it's not the same.
It's not the same, no.
This album is my favorite Rush album. Now, like I said, there's not much separating these top spots for me. They changed a lot during this because I really couldn't decide which ones I loved more than others. But what I can't deny is that I come back to this record more than any other record. Spirit of Radio, love it. Jacob's Ladder is my favorite song on the album. Natural Science is probably my favorite long-term song. I love everything about it, even Different Strings, which I didn't like as much at first. It's grown on me, I can't lie. Entre Nous is super catchy and melodic. Every song on this album I would return to more than most anything in the C, D, and E tier that we'll get into later. And that's why it has to be number one for me.
Yeah, and it is number one for me as well. Um, Now, if I were ranking these objectively, I would say that Hemispheres is objectively better. Just from beginning to end, it flows the best. There is one flaw, minor flaw, of Permanent Waves. Entre Nous. It's not even a bad song. It's just a bad song for this album. But beyond that, I mean, Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Natural Science, Different Strings, Jacob's Ladder. Literally every song on here is classic except Entre Nous, and even that one's pretty damn good. So this is, if you for some reason have never listened to Rush, this is your gateway drug. You need to listen to Permanent Waves. And just again, I said this before, the mix of this era, the really clean guitars. Free Will has possibly one of the best riffs of Rush history. Really good instrumentation from Neil Peart. Really good, just unique instruments as well. Spirit of Radio breaks down into going fucking reggae. How the hell does that even happen? But it happens and it works. I cannot say enough good about this album. Unfortunately, Tyler has said most of the good that I can say, so I'm just going to leave you with what he said.
Yeah, and to add to something you said, this album is without a doubt the best flowing album in Rush's discography. If I had one criticism for Rush as a whole, it's that their albums flow like shit a lot of the time. Even their great albums like Fly By Night, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, they flow terribly. Permanent Waves is like the only album I can think of, except for maybe one other, that flows really well.
I think that if we, like, this might just be a matter of preference, but I think that Hemispheres flows a little bit better than Permanent Waves. Because again,
going from that like really long epic to the trees. and circumstances to,
It
I
kind of
guess,
work.
instrumental, it's so
It
disjointed.
kind of works if you listen to it on vinyl. It flows better on vinyl because like the one side is dominated by that one side, and then you flip the album over. You still have a really long epic at the end, but you still have like two little radio hits that you can like promote. Like that's the thing is like unless you were Jethro Tull, which Rush at that point was not Jethro Tull, you couldn't get away with doing an entire album long epic. You could do like several songs, but I guess Rush just wasn't willing to do that. They were more interested in the self-indulgence aspect. So I think that's why Hemispheres flows the way it does. I think Permanent Waves flows really well apart from that one song. And that one song kept it from being at number one for almost the entirety of the list until Tyler kind of made the point of like, okay, well, what album do you come back most to? And I realized, like, yeah, Hemispheres might be objectively better, but Permanent Waves is my favorite Rush album.
All right, so let's go on to the next album, Moving Pictures. Now, I'm
I
going to be
think we
completely honest. I really, really just don't know where to put this on the list. Even as we're talking about it, I'm debating moving it around. This is the album by far that I just don't know where to put it because I love it, but I love what's above it more. But I want to love this more because Moving Pictures is a bona fide classic. You know, you have Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, and yes, it is Zed. Limelight, The
stupid
Camera
Canadians.
Eye, Witch Hunt, Vital. There's just so many fucking great songs on this album. When the worst song on the album is Tom Sawyer, and that is one of your best songs, you know the album is good, right? I think everyone agrees Tom Sawyer is the worst song, and at most everyone agrees that Tom Sawyer is great. We'll get to Logan's disagreement with that, but at the end of the day, the sad thing is this has got to be A tier for me. I wish I could put it higher in the S tier, but there is just one thing that bogs it down for me. I just don't return to it as much as the ones above it. I actually don't return to it much at all, if I'm being honest, at least as compared to what's above it. Uh, and this is, for the record, number 8 on my list. So there's 7 albums that I will listen to before this one. The chance of me listening to this one's pretty slim, and that's why I have it down here. That's not to say it's bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's just my preference.
All right, so I'm actually going to give Moving Pictures a B rating, and I think that it is extremely overrated, and I'm actually going to make, I think, a compelling argument as to why Rush fans should feel the same. What are the biggest issues that a lot of Rush fans have? Wait, did you put it? So is it? I didn't understand. So is it above or below 2112? Because you just moved it.
It's below 2112. I accidentally put it above,
Okay.
but it's below 2112.
Well, anyway, so what are the biggest problems with Rush fans and latter day Rush? Is like after this album, the over reliance on synthesizers, and how Geddy Lee's voice had massively gone downhill. Both of those can be said. This should be treated as synth Rush, I think. The Tom Sawyer, look, I grew up with classic rock radio, just like all of you, and probably some of you grew up with it when it came out. That's fine. It doesn't age well. Tom Sawyer does not age well. The synth is really annoying. The lyrics are really stupid. It's just, it's not a good song at all. Like, I mean, the riff is fine, obviously, but that's really all I can say about it. It's has some really annoying synth. It has some really stupid lyrics, and it's not a very good song.
Okay, but what about the rest of the album? The rest of the album is
Okay, let me get to the rest of
fantastic.
the album. Limelight is obviously the standout of this album. Amazing song. Red Barchetta, again, amazing song. Witch Hunt, amazing song. So you have three good songs, two songs that are kind of forgettable, and one song that is bona fide dog shit. That's a B-rated album for me.
What, you think The Camera Eye is forgettable? That's like one of Rush's best songs.
No. Isn't that that really forgettable instrumental?
No, that's not an instrumental. Are you saying YYZ is forgettable? Oh,
That too.
buddy.
That too.
Buddy, come on.
That too.
That's Rush's best instrumental, except for Via
No,
Strangiato.
no, no. There, um,
So
no. We will get
complex.
to Rush's best instrumentals in a later album.
Oh, come on. Like it's literally Hemispheres Rush. That's literally what it is. It's just more Hemispheres.
Yeah, but Hemispheres did it better.
Yes,
Like, I'm
but
not gonna say YYZ is awful. It's just something I would never listen to again in a million years.
oh fuck. That's such a blasphemous thing to say for me. Cuz like honestly, YYZ is probably the song I return to most on this album and it doesn't even have vocals. That's how good it is.
It's not that good, Tyler.
It's great.
It's
I
not
mean,
that
other
good.
than that, The Camera Eye, Limelights, but YYZ for sure. It's so
But like
complex. It's
beyond that, though, like okay, you have
amazing
Limelight, you have
riffs.
Red Barchetta, and you have Witch Hunt, which are genuinely really good songs. But we have the Synth Rush, which I think this is one of the worst sounding synthesizers on any Rush album. And we have Geddy Lee's voice, which gives out halfway through and never really recovers. So why is this somehow considered a different beast from Signals or Grace Under Pressure or
Because I
even
don't
the
think they went
or
as
even the
far into
really
synth as they did
I
on
think they
Signals.
did. I think that
They
they
did in
did.
portions, but like not as a whole album. They dipped their feet into synths, but they didn't like try to use it as a main, a main
Limelight
writing
is the
mechanism.
only song where you can really say that though.
YYZ didn't have like incredibly big synths in it either.
How would I know? It's so forgettable.
Oh God. Okay, let's go on to the next one before I strangle Logan over the voice call. The
All right.
next the next album is Signals. And this is where I'm going to start losing people because I did not like Signals much at all. In fact, this is going to be the worst Rush album we've talked about so far, in my opinion. This is going in D tier. This is a very, very flawed album for me. It is very hit or miss. It's clear that they were experimenting with using synths more than they had in the past. And some of it just does not work. Digital Man is a huge standout, but there were huge stretches of this album that I just don't like. Subdivisions did grow on me on repeat listens. I hated it at first, but every other song on the album, aside from Chemistry, The Weapon is so bad. It's so bad. Analog Kid is probably the most overrated Rush song of all time. New World Man, terrible. Losing It. Oh, Countdown. This album does not work. It's their first foray into this style of music, and they will do it way better, but this album just doesn't work. Okay, Logan, you're on.
You're wrong. No, seriously, how can you say that about Analog Kid?
it's not
Analog
it's
Kid
not
is
that good.
one of the best. Okay, so before we go on, let's see. I put that in the A tier. Where was that? I put that in the A tier below 2112.
Above Moving Pictures. Come on.
Yes, because Moving
No.
Pictures is not that good.
It's so much
Subdivisions.
better.
Subdivisions is amazing. Analog
Ah,
Kid, one of the best Rush songs of all time.
no,
That isn't on
it's not
Permanent
that
Waves.
good.
New World Man, amazing. Digital Man, amazing.
Yes, I'll agree to that.
Look. Are there some areas where this album kind of tries and fails to do some things?
The Weapon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like The Weapon, whatever. But the worst you can say about those songs is that they're forgettable.
No, The Weapon is bad. It's not just forgettable. It's bad.
It's not that bad.
It's bad.
Some things worked, some things didn't. It is the best album for bass, and Analog Kid is testament to that.
No.
New World Man is the best song on the album. Digital Man is really good. It has a really clean mix. It has a lot of funk influence, which I really like. This, I would say, this is the last album to really have that kind of clean mix. Grace Under Pressure kind of had it, but they were sort of experimenting with a new design for that mix, and I don't think it exactly works. But
as long as we're talking about the mix, Alex Lifeson got gutted in this album.
Oh, you are so wrong. You are so wrong.
So he's in the back of the mix.
Listen to the Analog Kid, because this is a synth album.
It's not good.
You're not good. You are so wrong on this album. How can you be so wrong?
How could you be so wrong on Moving Pictures? You put it in B.
You need to listen to this album again and really understand the genius of Analog Kid, of Subdivisions, of New World Man.
Subdivision is an over-glorified song about living in the suburbs. It is not that good.
That's not what it's about. It's about being an outcast.
It's about being an outcast in the suburbs.
It has nothing to do with... Subdivisions are like cliques, okay?
Look on Genius right now. Subdivisions.
Yeah. Be cool or be cast out.
It's about Canadian suburbia.
Okay, well, Genius is wrong.
You.
Genius is wrong.
It's not that good.
It is that good.
No.
So what if it's about the suburbs? Arcade Fire wrote an entire album about the suburbs. You know why? Because the suburbs is cool.
No. I'm just saying it's not that good. Okay? Like, it's meh. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's meh.
Come on, Tyler. Doesn't this album make you want to scoot the burbs?
No.
Doesn't this album make you want to go on your bad motor scooter and ride the burbs?
This album makes me want to ride myself into the burbs.
Well, you know what? Maybe you can do that, and maybe the world will be a lot better of a place now that we have one less hater.
Yeah, I don't understand the love for this album. The mix is terrible. I don't understand the production
hate
is
for
terrible.
this album.
The songs are not good.
This is the hate for this album. This is the hate for this album. It's purists. Purists who are one version of Rush or nothing.
But I love Grace Under Pressure, and Grace Under Pressure is more synthy than this album is in portions.
Yeah, I'll admit that Grace Under Pressure is objectively better than Signals, but I would not listen to it as much.
Well, I'm just saying you can't call me a purist. I love Grace Under Pressure.
Okay, but Grace Under Pressure is more along the lines of regular Rush than Signals, I think.
Oh, no. No, Grace Under Pressure is way more synthy than Signals.
I would even say it's one of their last really experimental albums.
What, Signals or Grace Under Pressure?
Grace Under Pressure.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty experimental album.
That's why I think it's more so in line with like Farewell to Kings or Hemispheres than
I guess, but it is still
80s.
synth Rush. I wouldn't say it sounds anything like classic Rush.
Anyway, Signals is an amazing album. Let's hear your wrong opinion about Grace Under Pressure now.
I forget, is that the next album?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so Grace Under Pressure.
Doesn't even know that Grace Under Pressure was the best album. Or
This is
next
another
album.
one of my favorite albums by Rush. Well, that's because the synth period all kind of like flows together for
Oh,
me.
you
I forget what order it goes in sometimes. Anyway,
piece of
so
crap.
Grace Under a Pressure for me is S tier. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it is the best Rush album. I have 3 albums above it, and there will be more. But it is one of the best Rush records, and even the band agrees with me on that. And this is without a doubt the best synth era Rush record, in my opinion. I don't even think there's an argument to that. It's like they took what worked on Signals and doubled down on it. Everything that was great about that album, they just did better here. Fantastic tracks that stand as some of Rush's best in Red Sector A, Between the Wheels, After Image, Enemy Within, Body Electric. I mean, I didn't even really like Distant Early Warning at first, but that song grew on me a lot too. Kid Gloves is probably the worst song here, and it's still great. I think this album as a whole has a way better mix. Alex Lifeson is not gutted. He has not been turned into a sausage, but he's prominent. You can hear some really good riffs that work with the synths, some awesome bass grooves that again
So I
work
have a
with the rest of the
question.
band,
I
and
have a
also
question.
really great drumming from Neil Peart. Well, let me finish first. Now, one huge criticism people have of this album and Synth Rush in general is that it's really goofy. This album gets really, really dark at times. I mean, look at Red Sector A,
Red
which is a
Sector
song
A
about literally the Holocaust.
and Neil and Geddy Lee's mother, who was a
Exactly.
Holocaust survivor.
This album, when it wants to make you emotional and make you feel, it can do that. And that's something I can't say about something like Signals. All right, what's your question?
Okay, here's my question. Masters of Reality by Black Sabbath.
Okay.
It combines the bass and the guitar so that they mesh together.
Yeah.
Obviously, the guitar is gimped then.
No. No, you can still hear the guitar a lot in the mix.
You can hear the guitar in Signals just fine.
You can't.
Yes,
You
you
can't.
can. You
It's
can hear it
hard
just
at
fine.
times to hear the guitar.
Well, yeah, in a
You have
more
to
synth,
actively strain to hear
in a
it.
more synth-oriented song. That's how you put priority.
No. This is Rush. This is Rush. It's a
This
rock
is synth
band.
rush. This
You
is
should
synth
hear the
rush.
guitar. It's synth
Okay.
rock, not synth pop.
Well, you're free to be wrong. Anyway,
It's mixed
um,
wrong. Okay. So what's your
anyway,
opinion on Grace Under Pressure?
um, so I'm going to put it right below Signals. Now,
Oh,
everything. Okay, hear
you're
me out.
killing me, Smalls.
Everything that you say about Grace Under Pressure is totally 100% correct. It all kind of comes down to preference, I think. I kind of grew up with Signals, and I have Grace Under Pressure on vinyl. I've listened to it several times. And I will say that this time that I listened to it for the video, I appreciated it a lot more. I probably would have put it down lower if I had not recently listened to it. And I might even listen to it again, and who knows, it might actually go higher. I think this is more of a preference thing. I think After Image and Red Sector A, I think are the two standouts and really the two songs that I remember off of this album. Now, it goes in a much more proggy direction than even some of the albums before it, but definitely a lot of the albums after it. So it is totally fair to call this the last good classic Rush album or the last just classic Rush album. And I really have nothing too negative to say other than I just don't like it as much.
All right, is that all you have to say?
That's really all I have to say. I don't have much to say on this album other than it's really good. I'm just obviously not like I think that I am wrong on this opinion. I think that I do have a wrong opinion on Grace Under Pressure.
You are the wrong opinion.
I would be willing to go back because given this album several chances and I just can't get into it. And I don't really know why. I think some of the songs just aren't as memorable as not even Signals, but also the albums that I've listed above it: 2112, Fly By Night, Permanent Waves, Hemispheres. I think I would much rather go back to those albums than Grace Under Pressure, not for any lack of the album as a whole. It's just me, I think.
All right. Well, that brings to another album that might get me in a little bit of trouble. Power Windows, which is one of the worst Rush albums, in my opinion. Oh God, I hate this album, people. It's
Why?
like they took what didn't work on Signals and double, triple, quadrupled down on it hard. I hate pretty much this entire record, minus Territories, which ironically is the one most people say sucks. I just find it to be boring and unremarkable. I definitely think it's at least slightly above average for music in general, but I would never, ever go for this Rush album above pretty much any album above it. And there are 17 albums above it. So there's a good chance I'm never going to listen to this album again, unless for some reason I think I might like it more than I did before, or I just want to shit on an album.
Okay. Power Windows, I'm not going to look, I'm not going to admit that Power Windows is a masterpiece, but I will put it right below Moving Pictures. I will put it below Moving Pictures. So, yeah, it's synth rush, and some could say it's a little bit overboard. To those people, this is another one of those albums I think really just comes down to preference. If you are willing to listen to the final countdown unironically and jam it on your record player and absorb the 80s cheese, then you listen to Power Windows. If you are a purist, you listen to anything but Power Windows. Um, and by purist, I don't necessarily mean like, oh, you know, only like these Rush albums. I mean like you just don't like that 80s cheese. You don't like 80s cheese in your Rush. I do like 80s cheese. And I will have it pretty much anywhere. Big Money is a really good song. Marathon, come on, listen to Marathon and tell me you don't get immediately just pumped up.
I don't.
Okay, well, you're wrong then. Again, it's full of 80s cheese. Territories, I agree with you, though, is the best song. And Middletown Dreams is also a really good song as well.
Emotion Detector might be one of the worst Rush songs.
I didn't write that down in my notes, so I don't really remember it.
It was really bad.
It probably didn't leave much of an impact. But you know, yeah, it goes in a more pop direction. It has really good bass, and Mystic Rhymes is bad, but I kind of admire, I guess, what they were trying to do with it. Um, so yeah, it goes in a more pop direction, and I totally understand why it gets the rap that it does of not being a very good Rush album. I don't mind it though, and I would easily go back and listen to it again, as I would every album so far. I would go back and listen to again.
And by the way, I really fucking hated the Big Money. Such a
Big
stupid
money
song.
going around the world.
It's
Come on,
stupid.
come on, that's synth.
I'll fully admit that might be the purist in me talking. I just think it's stupid.
I think you're
There
stupid.
are
Anyway,
stupid Rush songs that I find funny, but this isn't one of them. I just find this one annoying.
anyway,
All
let's
right,
go
so
to a Rush album that genuinely is terrible. Well, not
yeah,
terrible, but
Hold Your Fire. This is an album I think we can both agree is our worst Rush album.
yeah. So you can put that down there for the D rating for me as well.
You know, I really hated this album. I wouldn't say there is any Rush album that is straight up bad. But
Mm-mm.
this is really, really boring stuff. I was
Yeah.
practically begging for it to be over before the first half had even gone by. This is easily the most non-Rush sounding Rush album in their entire discography. The album opens with Force 10, which may be my personal least favorite Rush song ever. It sounds like Poison. This album does have Prime Mover and Time Stands Still, which are really good songs, but those
Yeah.
are the only good songs. And the rest of the album ranges from largely forgettable to bad.
Yeah.
Um, Songs like Tai Shan are, pretty legendary for how bad they are. I'm not going to sit here and say Tai Shan is the worst song on the album. I wouldn't even say it's one of the worst, but it is bad. Lock and Key is terrible. High Water, Second Nature, bleh. I hate this album. Would never listen to it again unless I just really was convinced I would like it more.
Now, I I would say I would listen to Time Stand Still again and maybe Open Secrets, but
Time Stand Still is good, but for me, I don't know if I would say it's good enough that I would return to this full album just to hear it.
I would. I think I would. That's like the only song I would really unequivocally return to. But I totally agree with you on everything. Um, the only thing I will say though is that the only thing I will say, like every song is terrible, but Tai Shan and Second Nature are two kind of guilty pleasures of mine. You know what I mean? It's like it's not like they're so bad they're good. It's that they're good in a guilty way, in my opinion, I guess. Like you don't want to admit that you like them, but I am right here. So
Yeah, in front of like 5 people.
yeah, my cover's blown, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, I'm pretty sure this video is currently elapsed an hour.
Yeah.
So if anyone's still watching at this point,
No, 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 no. We need to like
kudos.
I think we need to like I think people are going to be watching if they realize like the legendary just shit flinging we did over like the last two or so albums.
True. One thing I notice is that your ranking of the Rush albums is much less sprawled than mine. Mine's more like a
Yeah, it
scatter
is.
plot. Yours is
Because
like a giant.
I don't think like I said, I don't think any album is really bad. And there are, a D rating is still a 6 out of 10. That's still positive. I don't think there is any Rush album that's average or even below average.
I wouldn't say there's any that's below average, but Hold Your Fire stands as a straight 5 out of 10. If it got any worse or Time Stand Still wasn't on it, then it would be worse.
Yeah, I think if Time Stands Still wasn't on that album, I would say would probably drop a few points because that is, I would say, pretty much the saving grace of that album. The only reason it's a 6 out of 10 is just because I listen to that song a lot.
All right, let's go on to Presto now.
Okay.
Presto is probably my least favorite Rush album to talk about because it's just really boring. Not even boring as in like Hold Your Fire level boring, because at least that was bad. Like you could laugh at Tai Shan for how bad it is. You could listen to Lock and Key and go, wow, I mean, this is almost Room levels of bad. Presto is just so unforgettable, or I'm so unforgettable. Presto is just
Forgettable.
so forgettable that literally after I listened to it, I had to go back and look at the track listing 3 times to remember what the opener was, and I still didn't get the right opener. I was like convinced that the
I
opener
still don't remember
was
what the opener was of this album.
I thought it was Chain Lightning, but it's actually Show Don't Tell. And remember, I
Okay.
looked at the track listing 3 times to remember that. It's that forgettable.
I don't remember most of the track listing of this album.
But, I will say that overall, I think that the songwriting is better than Hold Your Fire. I think,
For what that's worth, I mean.
yeah. Anagram gets special mentioning for being really bad. I would honestly go as far as to say as bad as whatever song I said was the worst on Hold Your Fire. Oh,
Yeah.
right, Force 10.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably as bad as Force 10 and Tai Shan and those songs. But there are songs on this album that are kind of good. I like Chain Lightning. I think Scars is probably my favorite. I have a soft spot for Presto, mainly because of the live version. But nothing here is good, in my opinion. It's just decent at best.
All
What do
right.
you think?
So I am with you in saying that it's the second worst. I think that it is such a mixed bag. First of all, a thing that you can never really understate how terrible the production was on this
Yeah, I
album.
didn't even mention that. It's really
Yeah.
bad.
This is quite possibly one of the most painful albums, one of the most painful album experiences I've ever gone through.
It's so thin.
It's so thin. It's basically just like
There's no low end.
there's no low end at all. It's like a monkey
terrible.
was just mixing with the knobs, just like no bass, all treble. Just like it's like the
all
opposite of
about that
one.
treble, all that treble, no bass.
Exactly. It's like that one what's her name? Australian girl song, but the opposite.
Megan trains her dog.
That's it. Anyway, Megan Trainor. No, it's one of the most painful. And even the best song, which might actually be one of the top 10 Rush songs of all time, in my opinion, which is Red Tide. Bad Cats, even that isn't fully, excommunicated from the dreadful mix. This is like.
Also, look at that fucking album art. Holy crap, is that album art bad?
Ah, God.
Like, let me look up a bigger picture of this album art just to showcase how bad it is.
It's so bad. Everything about this album, except Red Tide. If Red Tide was not on here,
Look at that.
I might
It
actually put
looks
it
like a
below
bad
Hold Your Fire.
Photoshop job.
If Red Tide was not on here, I might actually put it below Hold Your Fire. Especially because I think that the two worst Rush songs of all time are on this album. Presto and Anagram. Anagram is, hey guys, it'd be funny. It'd be funny, guys, if we did a song called Anagram and it was all anagrams. That's genius. No, that's genius if you're like 14 and this is deep, all right?
Hey, Logan, let's make a band and write a song full of only haikus called Haiku.
I think that is very good. I think that is very good. I think that is.
Very good.
Oh, wait, no, I fucked that up. Never mind.
Yeah,
Anyway,
this is just not a great album.
No, but Red Tide, and I guess there's like some songs that Tyler likes on it. I don't remember them, and they aren't as good as Red Tide, so they don't really matter. Really, this album just ranges from Red Tide to Okay to Presto and Anagram.
All right, and that brings us to Roll the Bones, which is another album that I think is kind of shite. I mean, it's better than Power Windows for sure. It's a decent rock album. If I were ranking it, it would be a 6 out of 10. That's why I'm throwing it here in D. It just doesn't do anything all that great. It's generic. Okay, it's not even unique in any way. It's interchangeable with hundreds of other generic rock albums that came out around this time. The only thing it does differently is that it decides that it needs a rap part in the title track.
Seems like a bit of a paradox, you think?
Oh, Jack, relax. Get busy with the facts.
Should I take some Gluteus Max?
Fuck, that rap is so bad. In reviews or in interviews, Neil Peart has said like the whole point of that is because he always heard rappers can get so fun with their lyricism. can have so much fun
Okay,
with their
but like,
lyricism.
you have to
That's like
have like
it's terrible lyricism,
that's
Neil Peart.
terrible lyricism, especially for a band that should know better.
Just Lose It by Eminem had better lyrics. Just lose it. Ah.
Yeah,
Oh, and
so
also, you want to know what they did to make that sound? They had Geddy Lee record it, and they slowed down his vocals and then like de-pitched his vocals.
yeah, so that's basically like audible blackface, isn't it?
Yeah, it's literally just black voice, basically. It was fucking terrible.
Yeah.
And they were originally gonna get like an actual rapper, and they just didn't for some reason. Like, why didn't you? It might have worked then. I mean, you'd have to pay someone a lot of money to say those words in a rap song if they were a real rapper.
Yeah.
But I mean, hell, you could have gotten some failing B rapper to do it. Come on.
Yeah, come on. Get like, someone terrible like Lil Dicky or something.
Well, he wasn't around back then.
Okay, well if he was around, he would still be terrible.
Yeah. So what have you got to say about Roll the Bones that I always think is actually Roll Your Bones for some reason?
I think that there are some decent songs on there, mostly like the first three, I think. Bravado. What was the one song? I can't remember the name of.
It's that forgettable, guys. He likes it and he still doesn't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah. Oh no, Dreamline. Yeah, that's a good one.
The opener.
Title track, Bravado, and Ghost of a Chance are pretty good. I'd say those are standouts. Overall, I would put it a B column below Grace Under Pressure because those songs are pretty good. This is an album that is very of its time.
Wait, are you putting it in A?
No, I said in B. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, B, but between Moving Pictures and Power Windows. So it is better than Power Windows.
It's that good?
It's better than Power Windows. I mean, you don't like Power Windows.
I know, but you do.
I would say that there are some good. I think Dreamline is really good. I think Roll the Bones is really good. And like, yeah, it has that rapping section. It's goofy, but like the rest of the song is actually not too bad. Bravado is really good. Ghost of a Chance is really good. The rest of the album, all I can really say about it is that it's forgettable. No song is like ridiculously bad. And the one part of this album that is ridiculously bad, at least it's funny.
True.
So, like, I agree with a lot of what you say. This is definitely an album of its time, but it is also the best Rush album that they had released in quite a while up to that point.
All right. Unless you have anything else to add, let's move on to the one we are going to disagree with probably the most. Counterparts. All right, so this is going to be in my B tier, I think below Fly By Night. Yeah, below Fly By Night. So originally, I put this album a lot higher. Like, I think I even put it above 2112 originally. But I think I still love this album, okay? Don't get me wrong. It really surprised me with how great it is. It's probably the most underrated Rush album, in my opinion. The sound is dark, it's heavy, the instrumentals are some of the best in the band's discography, has amazing riffs and solos from Alex Lifeson, stuff we haven't heard for years, even a decade. Geddy Lee, great vocals on this album, and of course, great bass playing, great, amazing fills and support from Neil Peart. Peart's lyricism, in my opinion, actually reaches a high point with this record. The problem I have with it is that the second half is nowhere near as good as the first half. Like, to the point where sometimes after re-listening to this album, I kind of just like stop halfway through. After Alien Shore, I kind of just turn it off. Because Animate, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase, Nobody's Hero, Between Sun and Moon's all right. I don't like it.
I don't like it
Alien
either.
Shore, everything else kind of sucks except for Cold Fire and Leave That Thing Alone. Everything else kind of sucks. I do kind of like Double Agent a little bit, but the Speed of Love, guys, really? I think if you had cut the speed of love between Sun and Moon and Everyday Glory, this album would be much higher. But since I have to suffer through those songs, I can't put this album any higher than where it is. As much as I do love a lot of that first half, Stick It Out, Nobody's Hero, Animate, I don't know, man. I just don't really dig the second half as much, and I don't want to listen to it every time I listen to this album.
So I was expecting we might disagree a little bit more, but that's about where I would put it as well. B column right above Roll the Bones. Um, there, I agree to some degree with Tyler's analysis. My biggest problem is that it kind of shares the same issue with Roll the Bones, but in a different light. I think that it sounds like generic hair metal, whereas Roll the Bones just sounded like Rush desperately trying to sound cool. Um, it's like,
Even
okay,
the
yeah,
album artwork of Roll the Bones is like hopelessly edgy.
it's better than the album art of Counterparts. Anyway, yeah, it has a really good mix. It has a lot of songs are good, but kind of derivative, and also a lot of them kind of drag. Stick It Out is the epitome of that. It's dumb, I think. I think it is. Look, if you can listen to that song without listening to without singing in your head, Feed My Frankenstein by Alice Cooper, you are a better man than I. Beyond that, though, I mean, yeah, there are genuinely good songs. Alien Shore is a classic. Uh, um, I mean,
It's
there's
actually really
swings.
topical too, since that's about like equality.
Really, I didn't even think of that. But Animate is really good. Nobody's Hero is really good. Speed of Love, I actually like.
Nobody's Hero may actually be my favorite song on the album.
I
I
would
really
actually
love that
say,
song.
I would actually agree with you on that one. Is probably my favorite song.
Oh, and Leave That Thing Alone. I did say it's good. That is a really fucking great instrumental. It was nominated for Best Instrumental
Yeah,
Performance,
it is a
and it
good
was beaten by
instrumental.
Pink Floyd. So that proves
Yeah,
how good it is.
and Cold Fire also stands out. I think we actually kind of I think you, to some degree, I think you might kind of, because he initially put this a lot higher on the list.
Yeah, I
But
put it like in the top 5 initially.
yeah, and I don't agree with that. I think that it's really derivative in a similar way, but worse off in some cases than Roll the Bones. It is derivative of things that were happening at the time. Bon Jovi, Alice Cooper, all immediately came to mind. Now, don't get me, but and you know, it might, like, some people actually really defend this album. Sea of Tranquility fairly recently said it was the best album of 1993. I challenge people, okay, if you like this album, that's good, but do you also think that, like, the Hey Stupid or trashed era of Alice Cooper holds up? If you agree with one thing and disagree with the other, you're kind of a hypocrite, I think.
And honestly, I
So
don't think it sounds anything like Alice Cooper, personally.
I think I think it all kind of does. Come on, feed my Frankenstein. Stick it out, follow your pride.
Oh, I don't hear it.
Oh, well, you're wrong. Anyway, I mean, I guess we didn't disagree as much as I thought we would, which I
Yeah,
guess is
same.
not, which I guess isn't as entertaining, but you
I
know.
thought you were gonna shit on it and put it below the Rush debut album or something.
Oh no, I like it. There's genuinely good songs on there. I just don't think that I think that it is actually very overrated, because I think a lot of fans would say this is like the comeback album, and I don't really hear it.
I think that's what I would say too. This is the first album where Rush really get back into their groove, in my opinion. They will
To
do it
s-
better, but
yeah, to some degree. I mean, obviously it's better than a lot of the albums. I mean, it's better. it's the best thing they've released since Grace Under Pressure, but
Exactly. Although they didn't stay in this groove long, which brings us to
yeah.
our next album, Test for Echo, which is actually just going to go above Roll the Bones in the D category for me. Honestly, I don't have much to say on the topic of Test for Echo. It's a really meh album. I'd say it's a step up from Roll the Bones because it doesn't just sound like generic hard rock. It actually does sound like Rush again, but
Yeah.
you have songs like Virtuality, like Dog Years, and while I don't consider those to be offensively terrible, they're not great, especially with the lyrics. The
Yeah,
title track is really
I think the
good.
lyrics are offensively terrible.
Oh yeah, for sure. But the title track is really good. Driven was actually played for years live as like
Yeah.
a bass show off for Geddy
Yeah.
Lee, like a virtuoso thing. And I can understand why. Time and Motion, I don't really like all that much, but it's still probably the only other standout for me.
I basically have nothing else to say. D below Presto or above Presto.
Okay.
I don't really have much else to say. I think you said it perfectly. I think that Dog Years, also, you forgot to mention Half the World and Totem, which are both terrible. But they're actually worse because they aren't even funny. Like they don't have like the doggy heaven that Dog Years has, and they don't have the net boy,
Net
net
girl.
girl. They don't have that. So like they're actually kind of worse, and they're just kind of
It's true.
really kind of. I'd say those songs are offensively bad, but
Oh, and don't forget Limbo.
oh my god, they sampled the Monster Mash on that one.
The fucking Monster Mash
Which
Rush,
I mean, I
really.
give them points for what the fuck is them, but that's about it.
This is honestly my least favorite Rush instrumental of all time, though. Like, being
Yeah,
honest, it's so boring.
yeah,
I didn't even notice that they sampled the Monster Mash. It's so subtle.
yeah. I immediately noticed, and it was like, wait, what the fuck did they just do?
What the fuck was that? Excuse-moi. All
I
right,
was just like,
so
that was like my text. It was like, pardon me, did they just fucking sample the Monster Mash? Excuse the fuck out of me.
I didn't believe him. I was like, no, they didn't. Shut
And
up.
I sent him the time code, and he was like, did I just listen to that? Yeah,
All
but
right, so
there's not much to say about that one. All right, so we take a giant gap until 2002 until they came out with an album.
yeah. So this is I'm not going to go too much in depth into this cuz this video is long enough already at this point. But what I will say is that Neil Peart after the last album at some point, I don't remember exactly when, the band was actually already talking about maybe breaking up cuz they felt like they were a little bit creatively bankrupt. I think you could really hear that on Test for Echo, but then Neil Peart lost his wife. Or I'm sorry, he lost his daughter first. I think in a car crash. And like I think 9 months later he lost his wife. And like, can you imagine losing the two most important people in your life in less than the span of a year? He was probably just starting to get over the grieving of his daughter when his wife died. I mean, that's just I'm not even sure I would survive something like that. I don't think I'm strong enough. And if some of you think you are, you're kidding yourself. That's an
I think I'm
incredible
strong
amount of
enough. No,
grief.
I think I'm strong enough. I'm
You're
kidding.
kidding yourself.
I
No,
am.
seriously though, like that's just it's insane. And according to reports, and the man himself, he lost his will to live. He at the funeral, he was like, "Consider me retired. Rush is over." And he went and he just drove on a motorcycle for weeks. And he just drove and drove and drove because what else was he to live for? And that's just an incredibly harrowing thing going into this album because he did eventually come back and he did return to Rush, and they decided to do this album partly as therapy for Neil Peart to try and not get over, but at least deal with his grief. And I think that is one of the reasons why I consider Vapor Trails to be one of Rush's best albums. I think that Vapor Trails is absolutely deserving of the praise that it gets. And this is going to be an S tier for me. Now, when this album came out, it had a really terrible mix that suffered from something called the Loudness War, which I'm not going to
Oh,
get into here.
yeah.
But
There's a lot to get into with the Loudness War, but a
yeah,
lot of albums
do
at that
videos
time
on
kind
that
of
on its
suffered.
own.
Yeah, there's video. A lot of albums around that time
But
kind of
eventually it
suffered
was
from it.
remixed. Yeah. Yeah, but it was remixed, and in judging the remix, it's still not amazingly produced. But in my opinion, the songs are just so good that if it were really well produced, it might go all the way up past Farewell to Kings, maybe even past Hemispheres, because this album is just so fantastic. It's textbook no killer, or I'm sorry, textbook all killer, no filler. There's no bad song on this album. Everything is great. The only criticism that I could possibly come up with as a nitpick is that maybe it drags a little bit.
I agree. Touch, for example, kind of drags a bit, but I would say exactly the same. S tier, below. What was the last album? Hemispheres, below Hemispheres. I think, yeah, the album beginning to end is good. It's classic Rush. It's it's exactly what Rush fans had wanted ever since, arguably since Moving Pictures, but also arguably since Grace Under Pressure. It's exactly what they had wanted, and I guess unfortunately this is how we had to get the album, all of those circumstances preceding, but I guess, you know, tragedy gives way to art sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
that is what happened with Vapor Trails. It is a very good album. Not much more I can say that he hasn't already said. It's a very good album, like almost perfect 10. No, perfect 10.
And for the record, I am currently reading the book Neil Peart wrote about his experiences on the road after losing his wife and daughter. And I'll be honest, it's one of the most harrowing reads that I've ever, uh, ever read. I totally recommend it to people who are interested in that time in Neil Peart's life and wanted to know about the circumstances that uh, led to this album. All right, so let's go on to the next album, which is a little bit on a lighter note. Feedback. Oh, Feedback, you adorable little EP. Oh, you. Oh,
Backfeed.
you. I kind of just wish you were fed back into the machine that you came from, but I also kind of love you in a strange way. I'm going to put this in the C
You know, it's a lot.
category.
It's a lot like a human child. You love it, but you also secretly want to kill it.
Yeah. No, but seriously, it's a really good EP. It does exactly what it sets out to do, make some pretty good covers of classic songs. Hell, I would even say that this version of Summertime Blues is probably my favorite. I also really love the version of Seeker that's played on this album. Maybe it's the fact that I don't like The Who as much, but I really like this version more than the original.
Who Hater 69.
Crossroads. Crossroads was great. I do really love Cream, but I actually think I prefer this version to Cream's version. Of course, the Robert Johnson original will always be top for me. But, you know, the biggest problem I have with this EP is that it's lazy. I mean,
Yeah.
Logan can get into this more than me, but it basically only like chose 4 artists and covered like 3 songs from each artist. Like, really?
Well, actually, I did the math. It's actually 6, debatably 5 artists, and most of them they did 2. So like for example, they have two Buffalo Springfield songs. They have two two Yardbird songs and arguably two Who songs. I say arguably because I think their version of Summertime Blues might have been more inspired by the Blue Cheer version.
Which is
But
still really good, by the way. I listened
yeah.
to it.
Um Beyond that though, I think it's kind of lazy, but I would put it in the exact same area as he would, right below self-titled. I think that it's okay for what it is. No song, I think every single song on the album is average. Nothing is better than the original, nothing is worse than the original. Or I guess everything is worse than the original, but like it's not like no song on this album is really good or painfully bad. It exists.
I will say, for what it's worth, was really bad in my opinion.
I
I thought
don't
that was a
think so.
really bad cover.
I don't know if it was like really that bad. The only thing, again, to add to what he was saying is it's lazy. Like, yeah, I get Geddy Lee's voice had kind of, well, had very much given out by this point. But like, you could have done some Led Zeppelin, you could have done some Genesis or some Yes, or if you wanted to stick to the 60s garage rock sound, Jimi Hendrix, Rolling Stones, The Kinks, um, Alice Cooper, The Doors kind of go into like that Whiskey a Go Go sound of like the late 60s, early 70s that it was kind of trying to do. It's like, I'm not saying like all those songs, obviously it's an EP, but like scrap that cover of, I don't know, For What It's Worth and replace it with You Really Got Me by the Kinks. Why not? Or, I don't know, replace it with Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Obviously, they aren't doing anything super obscure except for, I would say, 7+7 which is a song by the band Love, which I'd actually never heard of before, but I listened to it. It's a pretty good garage rock song. Um, I don't know. I think it's just painfully average and kind of lazy, but it exists and it was an EP. So at least if you didn't like the album, you didn't have to suffer too long and it probably didn't cost too much money.
Yeah. That said, I would probably buy it on vinyl. I would buy all of these albums except for maybe Hold Your Fire on vinyl.
I think if I bought Presto on vinyl, it would destroy my needle.
The only reason I would buy Presto on vinyl is because of the album art. I would want to just own that album art. I wouldn't pay much money for it. I'd be like $5 is the highest I'd
Yeah, I
probably go.
guess.
But
I mean, I guess I would own like pretty much any one of these on vinyl.
except Hold Your Fire for me, because I really hated it.
I like Time
And also
Stand
the album
Still.
art sucks.
Yeah, it does, but like, I don't know. I think every one of these I would probably, yeah, Hold Your Fire. I think I would own that on vinyl.
Either way, like or hate feedback, it did give way to probably the best Rush album that we've had in a while, Snakes and Arrows, which I actually liked far more than I expected it to. After hearing from everyone that it's forgettable, that it's just not that good, to go into it and hear Far Cry, Spindrift, I mean, Armor and Sword. People, this is a fucking great album. I'm going to put it in the A category below Moving Pictures. Armor and Sword has not instantly, but has become one of my favorite Rush songs. Spindrift, again, one of my favorite Rush songs now. Far Cry, up there. Bravest Face, Good News First, Faithless, even the instrumentals, Hope, Malignant Narcissism, and especially the main Monkey Business. This album is a fucking beast. The only songs I would say don't work are, ironically, Workin' Them Angels and The Larger Bull. I honestly have no idea why these songs were on the album. They don't work. They're out of place. And the album would probably flow better if they weren't there. And that's ultimately why it's lower than Moving Pictures, because I was very tempted to put it above Moving Pictures just because of how strong some of these songs are. Overall, I really loved this album. And for those of you who listened to it once and just wasn't blown away, please give it another listen.
Well, you've definitely inspired me to do that, but as of right now, I have on my ranking that it's a B rating. I think,
Okay.
like, okay, so it is below Counterparts, and I think Far Cry is a really good song, and The Way the Wind Blows are the two, and those are the two standouts.
Oh, how could I forget? That's like one of the best songs in the album too. The Way the Wind Blows.
Yeah. I think it has a more polished sound. It's one of the most polished Rush albums, for better or worse. The main Monkey Business is probably the best instrumental they've ever done in their entire career. It actually has three instrumentals, which are okay. That's good, but considering the album's length, I think it's kind of unnecessary. And the last few tracks also should have really been cut. Um, I think that the album, it's it isn't as good as Vapor Trails or Clockwork Angels, which we will get to later. But I mean, it's better than
Next.
Roll the Bones and everything below that.
All
It's
right,
it's
so are we on the last album now?
yes, we are.
Wow, I mean, it's been a really long listening to all of these albums, but I got to say, I almost feel kind of sad that it's over.
Yep.
I kind of want to just start at the beginning and listen to all of them over again because Rush is just that good of a band.
Well,
And
if it's
es-
any consolation, I think that they ended on a very good note.
I agree. And you're probably going to be a little shocked where I put this because this is going to go above Hemispheres for me in
Yeah,
the S
same for
tier.
me. Same for me. I think it
Holy
is the
crap, guys.
I think it is the second best Rush album of all time.
This album I was so shocked by how good it was. And this is the first real straight up concept record that Rush has ever or will ever make. It has a story, it has a beginning and an end, and it goes the entire record rather than just one half of the record. I loved this album. Geddy Lee sounds great, better than he has in years, in my opinion. And he still proves to me why he is my favorite bass player, especially on this album. He has amazing, amazing grooves. I don't think the bass playing has been this good since maybe Hemispheres, if I'm being honest. Alex Lifeson has some of his best riffs and solos on this album. You know, Neil Peart, killer performance. In my opinion, I think I forgot to say this, but La Via Strangiato, however you're supposed to say that, that is Neil Peart's best performance on drums. But if I were to consider this entire album, it would be second place. It has amazing writing. The story is good enough that just like 2112, it's been adapted into a novel. It's been adapted into comics. The album is heavy, diverse, catchy. I don't understand why there are people out there who just don't love this. I don't understand why there are people out here who don't like that album.
Really, there are?
There's a lot of people who don't like it. A lot of people who think it's like one of their worst albums. I don't
Oh,
hear
they
it.
are so wrong. Look, okay, I'll so whenever you're done, I'll give
Oh, I'm
my
already
opinion.
done. You can
Okay.
go.
Yeah, so like I said, it is the second best and objectively the best album of all time. It's really good instrumentation. The only tiny little nitpick is that the mix seemed a tiny bit off for me, in my opinion. And that's just a nitpick, and it barely affects. The mix is still good, but just not as good as maybe even something like Vapor Trails. But that being said, it's the closest they go back to that classic sound with like the really clean instruments. Every song ranges from good to amazing. The concept, while kind of goofy, is ultimately really nice. I mean, it's based off of something called clock punk, which has to be the weirdest subgenre since goat metal,
Hmm.
which
Is that a
doesn't
thing?
exist. It's not a thing, but it will be soon. Trust me.
Ball rock.
Yeah, but it's so like
Moo-core.
with that weird Rue core. Did you say?
Moo-core.
Oh, Moo core. I thought you said Rue core, like RuPaul core. No,
Oh, and we already have Pig Destroyer, so we don't need a subgenre for that.
oh, okay. But you have like it's just such an amazing album, and it ends the Rush discography on one of the most melancholy songs of their career, considering like this is the last Rush song we will ever hear. I mean, they aren't reuniting. Neil Peart is dead. You can't replace Neil Peart.
Yeah, I mean, he may be the new kid in the band, but he's super important.
What are they gonna do? Bring John Rutsey back?
John Rusty Rutsey.
But yeah, it ends on The Guardian, which is a very
Garden.
melancholy track. It kind of reminds me of the end off of Abbey Road, or In the End rather. Kind of like when you listen to that song, you reflect on the legacy of an amazing band. I mean, look at my list and notice how the entirety of the E and F columns are totally blank. That is
Mine
how
aren't.
amazing. Okay, well, he's a hater.
Let's just pretend these albums don't exist. It's all right.
All right.
It's okay. Let's just turn them off. It's not letting me. Fuck. Oh well.
Just put them in the D category, or better yet, put Power Windows like in the S category where it belongs.
Yeah, you're right.
But
it belongs all the way up here above Clockwork Ain't. No, I'm joking.
No, it's not that good. No, but just take a look and reflect at how great all of these albums are. Not counting the 3 that Tyler has at the bottom, but yeah.
Like Rush has such a diverse and just
I mean, to
executed
counteract that, like,
discography.
look how many he has, at least in the S category.
Yeah, there's 6 albums in my S category. There's 4
Exactly. That's more albums than most bands release in a lifetime, and that's just the 10 out of 10 albums that Rush has done. Rush is a fantastic band. Why else? Hold on. Is it visible in the shot? I don't think so.
It's not. But he does have... Oh, there you go.
Yeah. There's a Rush poster. I have them right next to Led Zeppelin. I have a Beatles poster here as well, and I'm thinking of putting in a Metallica poster.
You should
All
get
of
a
those
Black
bands are really
Sabbath
good.
poster like mine, because it's really
I
good.
should, but my brother just has a Metallica poster, and we're going to move it at some point. Anyway, that's beside the point. My point is Rush is amazing, and if you don't like Rush, what the hell is wrong with you?
I agree. I think if you don't like Rush, you need to listen to Moving Pictures. You need to listen to 2112. You need to listen to Permanent Waves. Those
Well, you
are
need to
probably
listen.
not
Well,
going to
you
end
don't
up
need
being
to
your
listen to.
favorite
You don't need to
albums,
listen to
but-
Moving Pictures. You need to listen to good albums. But
Fuck you. No, but you can't argue Moving Pictures is pretty representative of like their classic sound. Whether you
fair
think
enough.
it's their best after listening to the rest of their albums.
I still think it's more representative of synth Rush, but
even so, I would recommend that album over something like Grace Under Pressure, which might be really rough
I guess.
for a new band. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you were looking to get into Rush, you should look into the Crash Thompson video, how to get into Rush. Those 2 videos are absolutely phenomenal, and being honest, the main inspiration for me wanting to do this series in general, how to get into anything. Because he did one on Tool, Pearl Jam. I love those videos. They're great videos.
Yeah. So let's count our lists off and then end the video.
All right.
So you do yours first.
For me, my list starts with Hold Your Fire, then Presto, Power Windows, Roll the Bones, Test for Echo, Signals, Feedback, which I will say right here, I don't really want to compare the Feedback to the rest of Rush's discography because it's a covers EP, but if I had to include it, this is where it would be.
This video is 2 hours long. Don't ramble.
Rush, Caress of Steel, Counterparts, Fly By Night, Snakes and Arrows,
Loser.
Moving Pictures, 2112,
Loser.
Paper Trails, Grace Under Pressure, Farewell to Kings, Clockwork Angels, Hemispheres, and finally, the best Rush album of all time, Permanent Waves.
Right. So let's get to my list. Worst is, I agree with him, Hold Your Fire, then Presto, then Test for Echo, Feedback, Self-Titled, Caress of Steel, Power Windows. Actually, that should be in the S tier column, but what can you do?
No, let's just put it down here with an F, I think.
Roll the Bones, Snakes and Arrows, Counterparts, Moving Pictures, Grace Under Pressure, Signals, 2112, Fly By Night, A Farewell to Kings, Vapor Trails, Hemispheres, Clockwork Angel, and then finally, we both agree on this one, Permanent Waves is the best Rush album.
Don't you think it's kind of funny how, although we disagree on a lot of stuff in the middle, our worst and best are pretty much the same?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, those are just really objectively really good and really bad albums.
Yeah, but I mean, even Presto and Clockwork Angels mirror completely.
Yeah, exactly. And wait, does Hemispheres mirror as well? I think so.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's interesting how Rush has such a vast discography that we can disagree this much on it, though, in the middle.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Like,
despite having so many good albums.
like I said, Power Windows, I'm not going to say that that's objectively a good album. Signals, I will say, is objectively a good album, but Power Windows, I will say, is not necessarily objectively good. I think that it all comes down to taste, and do you like 80s cheese in your Rush or not?
Well, if not, you probably hate synth Rush in general. But
Exactly.
I'd say that there are a few eras of Rush objectively. There is what is generally considered Led Zeppelin fan fiction, and then I would say prog Rush, and then classic era Rush, and then synth era, and then
dog shit era,
90s Rush, and then modern Rush. So there's 6 eras of Rush that you could get into.
Exactly. And of course, I think even the people who don't like Rush, they like classic Rush. Like, come on, you can't tell me that when Limelight comes on the radio, you don't start fucking.
Exactly. Limelight's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is like a very long video, so we should probably end it off. I will
fuck it.
end
Let's
it
make it
by
longer.
saying, yeah, let's make it 3. Let's just restart entirely and go over again, but this time in tier list order.
No, we should do it backwards.
So the best Rush album is no. Oh God. So this has been probably my favorite video to make so far because I got to listen to all of these amazing albums. I loved doing the Dream Theater one, but I think it was so much more fun listening along and being able to talk about it with another person. So much fun. And I think we have agreed that the next one we're doing is Blue Oyster Cult. So look forward to that.
Didn't we agree that the next one we're going to be doing is the Puddle of Mud?
No,
best and worst, right?
Puddle of Mud my ass.
Come on. Yeah, you're right. There might be too many S tier ones. Anyway, so
yeah, well, we all know would be number 1, of course. Welcome to Galvania. Is that what
the name of the album is? We've reviewed it and I barely remember it.
It's Welcome to Galvania.
I just remember it being really bad.
It was so bad. Okay, we need to end this video.
Well, this is Logan Diener saying, "You are only immortal for a limited time."
And I have been Fred Durst. What?
And you have been irrelevant. Goodbye, everyone.